Humanity walked away in silence, leaving the Galactic Council to face the consequences. The vote was already over when I walked into the chamber. I knew it before I sat down. I could tell from the way the Velhari delegation avoided my eyes, from the way the Keth observers shifted in their seats, from the way Grand Speaker Olarin arranged her long silver fingers on the podium as if she were about to deliver a eulogy rather than a verdict. My name is Yael Orin. I have served as Earth's senior diplomatic ambassador to the Galactic Council for 19 years. I have sat in this chamber through 412 sessions. I have shaken hands, or whatever the equivalent gesture is for 30 different species, with beings whose home stars are thousands of light years from my own. I have smiled through insults dressed as compliments, absorbed dismissals wrapped in formal language, and signed agreements that quietly disadvantaged my species while pretending to honor us. I have done all of this without raising my voice once. Today would be no different. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council stretched above me, like the inside of a cathedral built by something that had never seen a human church. The ceiling was a living map of the galaxy, slow rotating, star clusters pulsing with soft light. Around the central floor, tiered seats curved upward in concentric rings, 214 species, each with their own delegation, their own flags, their own quiet conversations that stopped the moment I entered. I took my seat at the human representative's station, a circular desk of dark composite material with Earth's blue and green emblem inlaid on the front. My aide, a young man named Callum Price, set a water glass beside me and leaned close. The preliminary count came in 20 minutes ago, he said quietly. 41 in favor. 173 against. I nodded. I did not look surprised. I was not surprised. Callum had joined my team 3 years ago, fresh from the Diplomatic Corps Training Center in Geneva. He was 26 years old and still believed that if you argued well enough, the right people would listen. I had believed that once too. It was not an unpleasant thing to believe. It was simply not true. Did they give a reason this time, I asked. Insufficient demonstrated commitment to collective security protocols, he said, reading from his tablet. And an unresolved aggression index variance of 4.2. An aggression index variance of 4.2, I repeated, keeping my voice flat. The Drathine sovereignty went to war with the Morali Drift 11 years ago. They lost 40 million people in 14 months. Their aggression index was cleared inside 2 years. Ours has been flagged for 80. I know, Callum said. The Velhari bombed 3 neutral stations along the outer corridor 40 years ago. No index flag, no review. Full voting rights restored at the next session. I know, he said again, softer this time. I said nothing more. I folded my hands on the desk and waited for the session to begin. Grand Speaker Olarin rose from her elevated platform. She was Velhari, tall, pale, with the kind of slow and deliberate movements that made everything she did look rehearsed. The Velhari were the oldest spacefaring civilization currently seated on the Council. They had been exploring the stars for 4,000 years. They had also, in my professional opinion, spent approximately 3,000 of those years learning how to make condescension sound like wisdom. The Council recognizes the ongoing application of the human collective, Olarin said, her translated voice smooth and unhurried through my earpiece. Following review of the updated eligibility assessment submitted by Earth's delegation in the second quarter of this cycle, the Council has reached its determination. She paused. Not for dramatic effect. I had long since stopped giving her credit for artistry. She paused because pausing was what one did when one was absolutely certain the other party had no meaningful recourse. The application for full membership status is at this time not approved. A low murmur moved through the chamber. Not shock. More like the sound of a crowd watching something expected happen exactly as expected. The Council encourages the human collective to continue its contributions to galactic stability in its current observer capacity and to reapply when the relevant eligibility thresholds have been addressed. Observer capacity. That was the word they used, after 80 years of applying. After 3 generations of human diplomats sitting in this chamber, filing paperwork, fulfilling every requirement, meeting every benchmark, only to find new benchmarks waiting. Observer capacity. I wrote a single line in my notebook, old habit. Paper, not a tablet. There was something about writing on paper that felt honest in a way that screens did not. The line I wrote was, "They did it again." The session continued. There were other matters on the agenda. Trade route realignments, a border dispute between 2 mid-tier council species, a proposal to expand the Collective Emergency Response Fund. I listened. I took notes. I cast Earth's non-binding observer vote on each item, as I had done for 19 years, knowing that non-binding meant the vote was theater. and that I was a performer in a play whose ending had been written before I arrived. After the session, as the hall began to empty, Olerin descended from her platform and walked toward me. This was new. She did not usually come to me. We met in formal settings, in scheduled bilateral sessions, in structured environments where everything was documented and measured. This was different. This was personal. She stopped in front of my desk and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as patient sympathy. The kind a teacher gives a slow student who has tried very hard and still failed the examination. Ambassador Oren, she said, I hope you understand that this determination reflects process, not character. Of course, I said. The Council values Earth's contributions enormously. Your species has provided extraordinary support to galactic stability. Your medical programs alone have saved perhaps 30 million lives across 17 systems. 22 systems, I said pleasantly, and closer to 47 million by our count. She smiled. Yes, quite remarkable. And that spirit of generosity is precisely what the Council hopes to see continue. I looked at her for a moment. Grand Speaker, may I ask you something directly? Of course. Is there anything, any threshold, any measure, any specific and objective criterion that, once met, would guarantee Earth's full membership? She held my gaze. Her silver fingers folded together. The Council evaluates applications holistically. That was not an answer. We both knew it was not an answer. I nodded anyway, the way I had nodded 10,000 times, and said nothing. She gave me a small bow and moved toward her own delegation. As she turned away, she said, almost as an afterthought, perhaps in another generation, humanity will find its footing. Another generation. I picked up my pen, I picked up my notebook, I capped the pen carefully, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and stood. Callum was beside me. What do we do? He asked. I thought about that question. Not about how to answer it, but about how many times I had been asked some version of it. What do we do when they say no again? What do we do when the rules change? What do we do when the process is designed to produce a specific outcome regardless of our actions? I had always had careful, measured, diplomatic answers. Today, I found I had a different kind of answer. Get me a secure channel to the Secretary General, I said. Encrypted. No record on Council infrastructure. When? Now, Callum. Right now. We walked out of the hall together, past the tiered seats emptying of species who had watched humanity be denied again and gone on with their afternoon. Past the glowing star map on the ceiling, still slowly turning. Past the human emblem on my desk, blue and green, left behind like a flag planted in territory no one ever meant to give us. The door closed behind us with a soft pneumatic hiss. I dictated my message to the Secretary General in the corridor, walking, not stopping. It was brief. 4 sentences. The vote failed. 173 against. I recommend we proceed with option silence. Effective immediately. Full withdrawal on a 60-day quiet timeline. No announcement, no statement, no response to inquiries. I removed my Council access badge from my jacket lapel. It was a small thing, oval, black with a silver Council sigil and my name engraved below. I had worn it for 19 years. I held it for a moment. Then I set it on the windowsill of the corridor. In a patch of light coming through the station's observation panel, left it there like something I had simply forgotten to carry, and walked away. I did not look back. I have learned, in 19 years of diplomacy, that the most powerful statement a person can make is sometimes not a statement at all. It is a door, closing quietly. It is a badge left behind. It is silence chosen deliberately by someone who finally has nothing left to prove. That was the last day I set foot inside the Galactic Council. It was not the last day the Galactic Council thought about me. The first month was almost peaceful. I came home to the small house in Lisbon I had barely lived in for 2 decades. The garden had gone wild in my absence, all climbing roses and overgrown lavender pushing through cracks in the stone path. Callum had arranged for the files, the secure terminals, the encrypted channels to be set up in the study. He had offered to stay on as my assistant through the transition period. I told him to take a month off instead. He looked at me like I had asked him to take a flight to the surface of the sun. A month, he repeated. You have been working 16-hour days for 3 years, I said. Go somewhere, sleep. He went. I stayed. The Secretary General's office had confirmed option silence within 48 hours of my message. The vote inside the UN Security Council had apparently taken 11 minutes. Not because the decision was easy, because every human diplomat who had ever sat in that galactic hall and worn that badge and been told to wait another generation had quietly, in their own private way, already made this decision years ago. The withdrawal was elegant in its simplicity. No press releases. No statements to the Galactic Council Communications Bureau. No formal notice of any kind. Human ships simply stopped docking at Council-affiliated stations for resupply. Human representatives stopped attending subcommittee meetings. Human scientists stopped submitting research to the collective compendium. Human peacekeeping escorts quietly redirected to Earth-aligned routes. The silence was the message. I spent my mornings in the garden. I pruned the roses badly at first. I had forgotten how, and then remembered slowly, the way you remember how to ride a bicycle after years away. By the third week, the paths were clear, and the lavender was trimmed, and there were tomatoes coming in along the south wall that I had not planted but appreciated nonetheless. Some previous tenant had left them, and they were doing magnificently without anyone's help. I found that funny in a private way. In the evenings, Callum sent me the intercepts. He was not supposed to. He was supposed to be on leave, but he sent them anyway, and I read them over tea, and neither of us mentioned the arrangement because it suited us both. The early intercepts were unremarkable. The Galactic Council was busy with its own business. The Valhari trade bloc was negotiating an expansion into the Outer Rim systems. The Keth Border World Assembly was filing objections to a new jump lane tax. The Drathene sovereignty was requesting the usual quarterly review of its conflict history, eager as always to see its aggression index reduced another decimal point. Not one session summary mentioned Earth, not one, 11 weeks, 81 days of human silence, and the Galactic Council went about its affairs as if we had never been there at all. I will be honest. There was a small and painful part of me that had expected otherwise. Some corner of me that had quietly hoped they would notice sooner, would feel the gap faster, would look at the empty chair and understand immediately what they had thrown away. That part of me was embarrassed by its own hope, and I let it be embarrassed, and I drank my tea, and I read the intercepts, and I kept my garden. Week 12 was when the Drathene request came in. The Drathene sovereignty had been managing a low-level internal conflict along its northern sector borders for 2 years. Not a full war, more a persistent and ugly dispute between two factions over resource extraction rights on a contested moon. Human mediators had been involved quietly, officially only as observers, doing the actual work of keeping the two sides from crossing lines that could not be uncrossed. When the situation deteriorated in Week 12, the Drathene foreign minister sent a formal request to the Council for Conflict Mediation Support. The Council, following standard procedure, forwarded the request to the Human Observer Mission Bureau on Station Velhari 3. The station systems logged the transmission. No one answered. The channel simply sat open, receiving nothing, returning nothing. 3 days later, the Drathene minister sent a second request, marked urgent. Same result. I read the transcript of the Drathene foreign minister's call to the council emergency desk and felt something quiet and precise settle in my chest. "What do you mean the Human Mission Bureau is unavailable?" he asked. His name was Ashen, and I had met him twice. He was a careful, measured being who did not use words like unavailable lightly. "The Bureau has not responded to council communications in 11 weeks, the desk officer said. "We are attempting to determine the cause of the communication issue." 11 weeks, Ashen said. There was a long pause. "That is not a communication issue." The desk officer had no response for that. I set down my tea. I looked out at the garden. The tomatoes along the south wall were doing very well. Ashen was right. 11 weeks was not a communication issue. 11 weeks was a decision. Week 14 brought the yokai situation. This one I had been expecting, and expecting it made it no easier to read about. The yokai pathogen had been a quiet nightmare for 3 decades. A respiratory illness native to the yokai system. It had mutated twice in 40 years into forms capable of infecting species outside its homeworld. Human epidemiologists, working through the collective medical exchange that Earth had co-founded 60 years ago, had developed the containment protocols that kept it from spreading through the jump lane networks. Those protocols required regular updates, constant monitoring, and, critically, a human specialist team based at the Yokai Central Medical Station. That team had departed in Week 6 of the withdrawal, quietly, professionally, without incident. In Week 14, the pathogen appeared in a trading post on the edge of the Yokai system. A small outbreak, 43 cases, manageable if you had the updated containment protocols. The Yokai Medical Authority sent a request to the Collective Medical Exchange for the latest protocol package. The exchange forwarded it to the Human Epidemiological Support Division. No one answered. I read the follow-up report 2 days later. The outbreak had grown to 112 cases. It was still manageable. It would remain manageable for perhaps another 3 weeks if the Yokai medical teams could piece together enough of the old protocols to work with. After that, the projections were not comfortable reading. I put the report down. I sat in the garden for a long time that evening. The sky over Lisbon was doing something extraordinary. That deep, slow color shift from orange to dark blue that happens in summer. The kind of sky that makes you feel very small and very specific at the same time. I thought about the 112 people in that trading post. I thought about Oshin in the Drathian Foreign Ministry, realizing that 11 weeks was not a communication error. I thought about the council desk officer, who had no answer. And I thought about the Velhari Grand Speaker turning away from me in that corridor, saying, perhaps in another generation, humanity will find its footing. I thought about that for quite a while. Week 16 arrived on a Tuesday. I was replanting the lavender along the eastern wall when Callum called. He was back from his leave. He had lasted 3 weeks before returning, which I had anticipated and not mentioned. Something in the intercept queue, he said. Personal channel. Addressed to you directly. Who from? A pause. Grand Speaker Olarin. I pulled off my gardening gloves. I went inside. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink with thorough and unhurried attention, dried them on a white towel, set the towel down, poured a cup of tea, carried it to the study, sat at my desk, opened the message, and read it. It was 12 paragraphs long. Olarin was a careful writer. She used formal council language for the first 8 paragraphs, expressions of esteem, acknowledgments of Earth's historical contributions, careful and elegant phrases that said a great deal without committing to anything specific. In paragraph 9, she wrote, "It has come to the Council's attention that communication with Earth's diplomatic and scientific missions has been interrupted across multiple channels. We are concerned that this may indicate a systemic technical difficulty and wish to offer Council technical support in resolving these issues at the earliest opportunity." A systemic technical difficulty. 11 weeks of silence across every channel, every bureau, every station, every mission, and she was calling it a technical difficulty. I finished my tea. I set the cup down carefully on its saucer. I did not reply. That evening, I called Callum and asked him to prepare a short summary of every council request that had come through human channels in the past 16 weeks. Unanswered, unacknowledged, sitting in the dark like messages sent into a room where nobody lived anymore. How many are there? I asked. 47, he said. And what are they requesting? He read through the list. Mediation support, medical protocol access, jump lane maintenance data, translation services for 4 non-standardized languages, gravitational monitoring reports for the Leth system, debris clearance coordination for 2 major shipping corridors, xenobiological threat assessment for a newly discovered organism in the outer sectors. I listened to all of it. When he finished, I said, "Do you remember what they told us when we applied for membership the 3rd time? 31 years ago? I wasn't born yet," Callum said. "They said Earth was a generous civilization," I told him. "But generosity was not the same as readiness. They said we gave a great deal, but giving did not entitle one to a seat." Callum was quiet for a moment. "They really said that?" "Word for word. I have it in my files." Another silence. "And now they want the giving back, without the seat." I looked out the study window at the dark garden, at the shapes of the lavender and the roses against the Lisbon night. The tomatoes along the south wall were invisible now, but I knew they were there, doing well, needing nothing. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what they want. And we will see," I said, "how well a galaxy runs without the people it never thought were worth a chair." I closed the channel. I turned off the desk lamp. I sat in the dark study for a while, listening to the night outside, thinking about 47 unanswered messages sitting in the silence, and about all the years I had spent answering everyone. That night, the Galactic Council held an emergency session about a routing failure in the Leth system's gravitational monitoring grid. Human technicians had maintained that grid for 20 years. The session lasted 6 hours. They did not find a solution. I slept very well. Admiral Petra Hollis did not think of herself as someone who made history. She thought of herself as someone who did the job correctly, completely, and without unnecessary drama. That was how she had made it to Admiral at 44. That was how she had managed the largest long-range escort operation in Earth's naval history for the past decade, keeping 400 shipping corridors safe across 18 Council-adjacent systems. That was how she had earned the quiet respect of every captain under her command, and the equally quiet wariness of every Council port authority that had ever tried to give her orders she did not technically have to follow. When the withdrawal order came through, it was filed under the classification heading Routine Reassignment of Naval Resources. Petra read it once. She sent one reply to Earth Command, confirmed, timeline 60 days, will advise on completion. Then she got to work. The first escorts pulled back in week 2. 4 vessels from the Keth Outer Corridor, redirecting to Earth-aligned patrol routes as if it were a standard rotation. No announcement to the Council shipping offices. No farewell communication to the corridor traffic control stations. The ship simply turned, made their jumps, and were gone. The traffic controllers logged the departure. They sent a routine inquiry to Earth's Naval Coordination Bureau asking for the replacement schedule. Nobody replied. Petra watched the departure logs from her command station aboard the carrier vessel Ashford, a wide, steady ship that she had commanded for 6 years and trusted the way you trust something that has never once let you down. She had her coffee in a standard Navy issue mug. She had been offered better mugs many times over the years and declined all of them. And she watched the departures the way she watched everything. Steadily, without sentiment, making mental notes. Keth South Corridor is clear, her operations officer, Lieutenant Commander Nora Daly, reported. No traffic incidents. The Valhari freighter convoy that was due escort at 0400 rerouted to a Council patrol vessel. And how did that go? Petra asked. Nora's expression told the story before her words did. The Council patrol vessel is a Morali-class light cruiser, not really designed for convoy escort. They managed, but the convoy arrived at the Keth station 6 hours late, and one of the Valhari freighter captains filed a formal complaint. With whom? The Human Naval Coordination Bureau. Petra sipped her coffee. And no response. Good, Petra said. In week 4, 6 more escorts pulled back from the Drav shipping belt, one of the busiest commercial corridors in the sector, carrying ore shipments from 3 mining systems to refinery stations serving 12 species. Human escort vessels had patrolled the belt for 31 years. The reason was simple and had never been formally acknowledged by the Council. The Drav belt had a piracy problem, and human tactical response time was faster and more coordinated than anything else in the region. When the escorts left, Petra expected the pirates to wait a few weeks. She was wrong. They moved in 9 days. 3 raids in a 6-day window. A Keth ore transport, 2 Valhari commercial freighters, and a mid-sized cargo hauler registered to a species called the Pell, who were too small to have their own security force and had always quietly relied on human patrols without formally saying so. The Kith lost 40% of their cargo. The Valhari freighters were boarded, their crew confined, and their cargo transferred to smaller vessels that scattered through 4 jump points before any response could be organized. The Pell hauler was simply abandoned, crew evacuated on emergency pods, ships stripped clean and left drifting. Petra read every incident report. She did not enjoy reading them. She was not made of stone. But she also understood, with the precision that 19 years of naval command had built into her, that every one of these raids had been made possible not by human departure, but by a council that had spent 3 decades enjoying the safety provided by human ships, while classifying those ships as observer assets, rather than the actual defensive backbone of the region. They had gotten the protection without paying the respect. Now they were paying the actual price. At week 6, the Galactic Council's Security and Stability Subcommittee held an emergency session specifically about the patrol coverage gap in the Drav Belt. Petra received a summary through Callum's intercept network and read it that evening. The session had lasted 4 hours. Multiple species had proposed solutions. The Valhari offered to expand their patrol presence. Their ships were fast and well built, and Valhari captains were skilled. But Valhari patrols required significant budget allocation, and the Valhari Trade Consortium was not interested in subsidizing security for shipping lanes that carried competitor cargo. The Keth Assembly offered a contribution in theory but not in practice. The smaller species had no capacity to contribute. In the end, the session produced a working group. The working group would study the problem. The study would take 6 months. Nora came to the command deck while Petra was finishing the summary. She stood beside the admiral without speaking for a moment, looking at the star display. They made a committee, she said finally. A working group, Petra corrected. What is the difference? About 4 extra meetings before they admit nothing is happening. Petra set down the summary. Do you know how long it took us to establish the Drav Belt Patrol Network? No, 4 weeks, Petra said. Commander Grant Ellison, 31 years ago, assessed the threat, proposed the patrol pattern, had ships on station in 4 weeks. No committees, no working groups. He saw the problem and he fixed it. Nora was quiet for a moment, and the council never gave us credit for it. The council classified it as a routine observer support function, Petra said, meaning it did not count toward our membership eligibility assessments, was not included in our formal contribution record, and earned us no political weight in any session. Nora stared at the star display. So we were doing the work of a full member. We were doing more than the work of a full member, and they still said no. 173 to 41, Petra said. The ship hummed around them. Outside the observation panels, the dark between systems was very still. Admiral, Nora carefully, do we feel guilty about the raids? About the people whose cargo was stolen? Petra had been expecting this question. She had asked it of herself, alone in her quarters, in the particular and private way that commands ask difficult questions of themselves at 2 in the morning. We did not raid those ships, she said. We did not create the pirates. We did not build a system in which one species quietly served as everyone else's security force for 30 years, without acknowledgement or rights. We stopped doing something we were never officially credited for doing. The Council had 30 years of warning. They had the incident reports, they had the statistics, they chose to call us observers. Nora nodded slowly. And now they're observing what that means. Yes, in week 8, Petra completed the final phase of the withdrawal. The last human escort vessels peeled away from the outer corridor shipping lanes, the longest, most contested, most piracy-vulnerable commercial routes in Council space. She watched the last ship make its jump from the command deck of the Ashford, coffee in hand. The Council's logistics network logged the departure 17 minutes later. The automated system sent a query to Earth's Naval Coordination Bureau. No response. 40 minutes after that, a Council Port Authority official sent a personal message to Petra's registered diplomatic contact channel. Petra read it. The official's name was something she could not quite pronounce, but the message was in plain translated standard. It said, Admiral Hollis, we have noticed a significant reduction in Earth naval presence across multiple patrol zones. Is there a resource issue we can assist with? Please advise. Petra stared at the word assist for a long moment. Assist. After 31 years of being told that Earth's patrol operations were observer support functions. Assist. From a council that had classified human ships as background assets, while denying the humans who operated them a seat at the table where decisions were made about the very space those ships patrolled. She handed the tablet back to Nora. File it, she said. Respond? File it. In week 10, the Council's internal intelligence assessment, obtained through channels Petra did not ask Callum to explain, described the human withdrawal situation for the first time in formal writing. It was a dry document, full of bureaucratic language, but the core finding was written in plain enough terms that even a Council subcommittee could not misread it. The document listed, for the first time in Council records, every function that human personnel had been performing across Council-adjacent space. The list was long. It was longer than Petra expected, and she had high expectations. Jump lane maintenance and hazard monitoring across 42 corridors. Xenobiological threat assessment and containment advisory for 6 ongoing biological concerns in outer systems. Gravitational anomaly tracking in 3 high-traffic systems where the monitoring data had been seamlessly integrated into Council navigation systems for so long that the Council had forgotten humans were generating it. Translation and communication support for 14 species whose languages were not covered by the standard Council translation matrix. Emergency response coordination for debris field clearance along 4 major shipping routes. And the patrol operations. All of it, every last corridor. Petra read the document twice. The second time, she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not righteousness, not the particular pleasure of being proven right. She felt grief. Quiet, precise grief for the 30 years of work done by human officers, scientists, technicians, mediators, and doctors who had built all of this into the fabric of galactic stability while being told they were not quite ready for a seat. Not grief for what they were doing now. Not grief for the withdrawal. Grief for what had been done to them. For so long. So quietly, so completely. She sat with that feeling for a while. She did not push it away. She thought that feeling it completely was the honest thing to do. Then she finished her coffee, set down the document, and looked at the star display. Nora, she said. Admiral, get me the final withdrawal report. I want it complete and clean. Every corridor, every station, every function, every departure date. Documented precisely. What for? Petra turned to look at her. Because one day, someone is going to sit across a table from someone representing Earth and talk about what humanity contributed to this galaxy. And I want the record to be accurate. I want every hour counted. I want every corridor named. I want the document to be so complete and so precise that there is no possible way to read it and call any of it an observer support function. Nora looked at her for a moment. Then she went to work. Outside, the outer corridor was very quiet. It would not stay quiet for long. When the Council came to Earth, they did not call ahead. I was informed of the incoming vessel through Earth's orbital traffic control, who flagged the Council diplomatic ship as an unscheduled arrival requiring clearance confirmation. The ship was a Velari state vessel, Large, pale, shaped like something between a wing and a blade. It had no scheduled berth, no pre-filed itinerary, and no communication on file with the Earth Diplomatic Coordination Office. Callum called me at 6:40 in the morning. I was already awake, which was not unusual. I had not been sleeping well, not from guilt or worry, but from the particular alertness that comes from months of waiting for something that has not happened yet. Grand Speaker Olerin, he said. In person, she has brought 5 senior counselors. They are requesting a surface meeting. Requesting, I said. That is the word they used. I sat with that for a moment. The Velhari Grand Speaker did not request things. She scheduled them. She announced them. She extended formal invitations through the appropriate channels with appropriate notice periods. Requesting, in Olarizin's vocabulary, was a new word. It meant she needed something she could not simply arrange. Clear it, I said. Neutral location. Government house in Lisbon. I want a full legal and diplomatic team in the room. Not the council station? We have withdrawn from council facilities, I said. This meeting happens on Earth. Our terms, our location. By the time Olarin's delegation descended, I had dressed carefully, briefed my team, drunk 2 cups of tea, and stood at the window of Government House's main conference room, watching the Velhari shuttle touch down on the pad below. The ship was beautiful, I would give it that. Everything the Velhari built was beautiful. It was perhaps the most useful thing about them. They entered the room in a line. Olerin first, silver composed, as unhurried as ever. Behind her, 5 senior counselors, 2 Velhari, 1 Keth, 1 Drathine, Ashen I noted, which was unexpected, and a small, quiet being from the Yolkai system whose name I had to check against my briefing notes. Ren Dovar, Senior Yolkai Health Commissioner. The presence of Ren Dovar told me everything I needed to know before Olerin said a single word. I welcomed them. I offered tea, not as a gesture of hospitality, or rather not only as a gesture of hospitality, because tea takes time, and I have found that people who are nervous about a conversation often say too much while waiting for the tea, and too much is always more useful than carefully prepared statements. Olerin took the tea. She did not say too much. She was too good for that. The first 8 minutes of the meeting were spent in the kind of formal preamble that diplomatic culture uses to create the impression of warmth, while everyone in the room knows that what is being said has nothing to do with why anyone is actually there. Mutual respect, historical partnership, the enduring bonds between Earth and the galactic community, the great value placed on humanity's unique contributions. I listened. I made notes on paper, as always. I let the preamble run its full course. When Olerin finally paused, I said, Grand Speaker, I appreciate the kind words. Shall we discuss the actual matters? A very slight change in her expression. Not displeasure, more like the adjustment a chess player makes when an opponent does something unexpected, but not unsound. Yes, she said. Of course. What followed was 40 minutes of the most carefully managed admission of difficulty I had ever sat through. Olerin did not catastrophize. She did not dramatize. She laid out the situation in precise, measured terms, the way someone reads a damage report while managing not to seem alarmed. 3 of the collective's outer colony systems were experiencing accelerating ecological instability. The terraforming maintenance systems required human specialist oversight to recalibrate, a process that human advisors had been performing quarterly for 12 years. Without recalibration, the atmospheric processors would begin degrading within an estimated 4 months. The systems in question were inhabited by approximately 900,000 people across 3 species. The Yolkai pathogen outbreak, which had grown from 112 cases to 11,000 across 2 systems, was consuming the medical resources of the Yolkai Authority at a rate that could not be sustained without the updated containment protocols held exclusively by Earth's Epidemiological Division. 2 border conflicts, one in the Drathine northern sector, one between 2 small species along the outer rim, had crossed from negotiable disputes into active incidents. Human mediators had been embedded in both situations at the point of withdrawal. Without them, both had escalated. And the shipping corridors. Olerin described the shipping corridor situation last, and she described it with the kind of brevity that meant she knew I already knew all of it, and that spending too much time on it would be embarrassing. I let her finish. I wrote my notes. I looked across the table at Rendovar from the Yolkai Health Commission, who had not spoken once, who sat very still, and who looked. I do not think I am wrong about this. Ashamed. Then I asked my question, the only one that mattered. Grand Speaker, has the Council's vote on Earth's membership application changed? Silence. The particular silence of a room in which everyone knows the answer and no one wants to be the first to say it. The membership process, Olerin began, is a formal, Has it changed? I asked. Same tone, same pace. No sharpness, no pressure, just the question repeated because it deserved a real answer. Olerin met my eyes. The formal review cycle for membership applications requires a full session vote. We have not yet been able to schedule. Then the vote has not changed, I said. She said nothing. The vote is 173 against, I said. Earth remains an observer, not a member, not a partner. An observer. Ambassador Orin. My name is Yale, I said. I am no longer an ambassador. I resigned that position 11 months ago when I left the council hall. You are meeting with me as a private citizen on the sovereign territory of Earth. Another silence, longer this time. Yale, Olerin said, with careful precision, as if trying out a new language. The council is aware that the current situation reflects gaps in communication and coordination that we wish to address. We are prepared to offer an accelerated review of Earth's application, a special joint consultative committee with elevated advisory privileges as a formal recognition agreement that would. An advisory committee, I said. She paused. Yes, with elevated privileges. Significant advisory influence on, but not a seat, I said. Not membership, not an equal vote. The room was very still. Ashen, the Drathian minister, looked at his hands. He had not spoken either, and I noticed that he looked less like a senior diplomat and more like a man who had come to this meeting, carrying a personal weight he had not fully reconciled with. I looked at him. Minister Ashen, you were in the northern sector when things deteriorated. He looked up. Yes, your mediation team put in a request through the council, twice. Yes, he said again. His voice was quieter than I remembered from our meetings years ago. We did. You knew by the second request that it was not a technical issue. He was quiet for a moment. Then yes. I am sorry about what happened in the northern sector, I said, and I meant it. I am genuinely sorry. The people caught in that conflict did not deserve to be caught in something larger than themselves. Ashen nodded. He said nothing. I thought he understood that the thing he could not say in this room was that he was sorry too. Sorry not for asking for help, but for the 80 years of a system that had made this moment necessary. I turned back to Olerin. Grand Speaker, I said, I will be direct. You came here to ask Earth to return to work. You have not come here to offer Earth anything. It has not been denied for 80 years. An advisory committee is a decorated version of observer status. It is a title placed over an empty chair. We are offering significant. You are offering, I said calmly, to let us give you what you need without giving us what we asked for. That is the same offer that has been on this table in different packaging for 3 generations. Olerin looked at me. For the first time in all the years I had known her, I could not read her expression with certainty. Not because it was hidden, but because it was complicated. There was frustration there, yes, and calculation. But underneath those, something else. Something that looked, if I was not entirely wrong, like the beginning of understanding. What would you have us do? She asked, and this time it was not a diplomatic question. It was a real one. I stood. I straightened my jacket. I walked to the window and looked out at Lisbon below. The old city in the morning light, the river, the white buildings on the hills, the life of a planet going about its business 900 million miles from the nearest council station. I would have you hold the vote again, I said. The real vote. With the real numbers. And the real answer. She said nothing. I turned back to face her. We will not return as observers, I said. We will not staff an advisory committee. We will not send our ships back to patrol corridors we have no vote over. We will not share our medical protocols through an exchange that has no obligation to credit us. We will not maintain systems in space that we have no recognized authority over. I kept my voice level and precise. If the Council wants Earth, the Council may have a full and equal Earth, or it may continue as it is. I walked to the door. My team rose. Callum was already holding my coat. This meeting is concluded, I said. Olerin's voice came from behind me, very quiet. You would let people suffer. I stopped. I kept my back to her for a moment. The room was very still. Then I turned around, just enough to look at her. Grand Speaker, I said, Earth has been suffering quietly for 80 years. We built systems, staffed corridors, shared science, lost people in disputes that were not ours, and spent 3 generations being told we were not ready. We did not ask you to share that suffering. We absorbed it, and we said nothing. I paused. The situation in the galaxy right now is not what we chose. It is the consequence of what was chosen for us. For 80 years. I let that sit in the room for a moment, then I walked out. Callum fell into step beside me in the corridor. He waited until we were out of earshot before he said very quietly, that was the right call. Ask me in 5 years, I said. But I thought he was probably right. 5 years. I have had time to think about what 5 years means in a human life. and what it means in the life of a civilization, and what it means in the slow, grinding life of a political institution that has existed for longer than humanity has had writing. For a person, 5 years is enough time to change completely, to become someone new, to let go of who you were and discover who you are without the structures that used to define you. For a civilization, 5 years is a breath, a single long exhale. For the Galactic Council, 5 years turned out to be enough time to begin collapsing without quite knowing it was collapsing. I am back in Lisbon. The garden is the best it has ever been. I have learned to prune properly. Callum visits on Thursdays. He is no longer my aide. He has his own office now, his own team, his own role, in the thing that Earth has been quietly building, while the Council held its working group sessions and filed its assessments and waited for a problem that was human-shaped to solve itself. Let me tell you what happened. In the months after the Government House meeting, the Council held emergency session after emergency session. They formed working groups. The working groups produced reports. The reports recommended further working groups. It was, in many ways, the Council doing exactly what the Council had always done, which was to manage the appearance of action rather than action itself. The difference was that this time, the gap between appearance and reality was visible to everyone. The yokai pathogen outbreak grew to 31,000 cases before a Keth pharmaceutical group, working from old records and a great deal of improvisation, managed to produce a rough approximation of the containment protocol. It was 60% as effective as the human version. The outbreak was eventually contained, but it took 8 months, and it cost a great deal. Not only in lives, though it cost those too, and I carried that in the part of me that does not let things go easily, but in political capital. The yokai authority submitted a formal statement to the Council, holding the collective medical framework responsible for inadequate redundancy planning. The statement politely and precisely pointed out that the entire containment architecture had been built by one species that had never been formally credited for building it. That statement was read at 4 subsequent Council sessions. It was not refuted. The terraforming systems in the 3 outer colonies were repaired. Eventually, Earth's government, after careful deliberation, authorized a limited humanitarian technical mission to provide the necessary recalibration. We did not do it through the Council. We did it through a direct bilateral arrangement with the affected species, negotiated on terms that included formal written recognition of Earth's technical contribution, binding credit in the collective development record, and a standing agreement for future cooperation as equal partners. The Council was not involved. The Council was not consulted. This turned out to matter enormously. Because when the Drathine Sovereignty, and then the Keth Borderworld Assembly, and then the small Morali Drift, 3 of the Council's marginalized middle-tier members, saw what that kind of arrangement looked like, they understood something that the Council's structure had always worked to prevent them from understanding. They did not need the Council to access Earth. They could simply ask. The first conversation between Earth and the Drathine happened through Ashen. He contacted me personally, not through official channels. We spoke for 2 hours. He was careful and honest, which I had always suspected he was capable of being when the architecture of the Council was not in the room with him. My government has been a Council member for 60 years, he said. In that time, we have been heard in approximately 12% of the sessions that directly affected our interests. 12%, I said. The others were resolved before we had full information, he said. Or the agenda was structured such that our concerns were procedurally secondary. Or the relevant vote happened in a subcommittee we were not assigned to. He paused. You understand this situation. I understand it very well, I said. We would like to understand what Earth is proposing, he said. We are not proposing anything, I told him. We are building something. If your government wishes to participate, the terms are simple. Equal voice, rotating leadership, transparent process, no membership reviews based on cultural assessments or aggression indices or any other mechanism designed to produce a predetermined result. That is a significant departure from Council structure, Ashen said. Yes, I agreed. That is the point. The Compact, it was eventually called the Terran Compact, though the name was a matter of some debate, and 3 of its founding members have other names for it in their own languages, was not formed dramatically. There was no signing ceremony in a grand hall. There was no formal announcement. There were 6 months of conversations between Earth, the Drathine Sovereignty, the Keth Borderworld Assembly, the Morali Drift, and 2 smaller species who had been quietly interested from the beginning. Then there was a charter. It was 31 pages long. I helped write 17 of them. It took 6 months because we were determined to write it correctly rather than quickly, and because every species at the table had been burned by documents that sounded right and meant something else. The core principles were simple. Every member held one equal vote. Leadership rotated on a 3-year cycle between all member species. Decisions affecting a specific member required that member's consent. No member could be placed under review for cultural or behavioral characteristics unless those characteristics directly and demonstrably caused harm to other members. Contributions to collective projects were formally documented and credited. That last one was mine. I wrote it on the 3rd draft. Callum argued it was unnecessary. Everyone at the table already understood the principle. I told him the principle needed to exist in writing because principles that only exist in understanding have a way of being forgotten when it becomes convenient to forget them. He agreed on the 4th draft. We did not announce the compact to the Galactic Council. We filed it as a standard bilateral cooperation network under existing interstellar law, the same legal framework the Council had used for centuries, which meant they could not object to it procedurally and had no grounds to classify it as a rival political entity. The Council noticed anyway. The first sign was a change in traffic patterns. Compact member shipping, the Drathene ore convoys, the Keth commercial routes, the Morali resource transports, began routing through corridors that were serviced by Earth's naval escorts under the new bilateral arrangement. Compact shipping ran on time, without incidents, protected by ships that were now operating under formal recognized agreements that credited their work and compensated their crews at properly negotiated rates. Council-aligned shipping continued using corridors that the Council's working group had still not resolved. The contrast became visible in the shipping data within 2 months. Then the Yokai Authority requested formal observer status with the compact. They were not yet ready for full membership. There were internal processes they needed to complete, but they wanted to be in the room. We said yes. Then 2 of the smaller species along the outer rim, both of whom had been council members for decades and had spent those decades being assigned to subcommittees that met quarterly and resolved nothing, sent quiet enquiries about membership criteria. We sent them the charter. By year 3, the compact had 9 full members and 4 observer species. It controlled, collectively, access to 14 jump lane corridors and had established shared medical, ecological, and communications frameworks that were, by every measurable standard, more efficient than their council equivalents. This was not because humanity was exceptional. This was because the compact was built on the premise that every member was worth listening to. And it turned out that when you actually listened, the decisions you made were better. I said this to a young Drathene diplomat who came to Lisbon to meet me in year 4. Her name was something I struggled to pronounce, but tried sincerely to get right, and she told me she appreciated the effort, which is its own small kind of diplomacy. She was young, by Drathene standards, barely out of training, and she had grown up in a political culture that had spent 60 years watching the Galactic Council make decisions above it. Does it feel like winning? She asked me. I thought about the question seriously, because it deserved a serious answer. No, I said. Winning is a competition. This is not a competition. This is a correction. I poured tea. I was always pouring tea in these conversations. Callum had once said I was biologically incapable of hosting a meeting without a kettle, which was not entirely wrong. The Galactic Council did not fail because it was evil. It failed because it became rigid. It built processes that protected itself instead of the people inside it. It decided very early on who deserved power and who did not, and then arranged all its procedures to make sure that decision was never truly questioned. And Earth questioned it, she said. Earth stopped participating in it, I said, which turned out to be the same thing. She was quiet for a moment. My government spent 60 years trying to change things from inside the council. I know. We made no progress. I know that too. She looked at her tea. Was it always going to come to this? Did it always have to go this far? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I thought about 19 years in the council hall. I thought about the 412 sessions. I thought about the 47 unanswered messages. I thought about Olerin turning away in the corridor, saying perhaps in another generation. I don't know, I said finally. I think there were moments when it could have gone differently, when the council could have looked at what it was doing and chosen to do differently. Those moments passed. They kept passing, and eventually I paused. Eventually, the only honest response to a closed door is to stop knocking and build your own. She nodded slowly. She understood that, I think, not as a political theory, but as a lived experience. In year 5, the The Galactic Council's budget for the collective security and shipping escort framework showed a deficit that its economists had not projected 2 years earlier. 4 of its major trade contributors, all compact adjacent species who had quietly shifted a portion of their commercial routing, were moving more cargo through compact corridors than Council-affiliated ones. The Council's jump lane maintenance data for 3 key outer corridors had not been updated in 2 years, because the human technicians who generated that data had not returned. The Council held a session about it, then another. A report was commissioned. I did not read the report. Callum summarized it for me in 1 sentence. They know what happened, and they do not yet know what to do about it. Then, in the final month of Year 5, a message arrived at Earth's Diplomatic Coordination Office. It was filed through official council channels, marked with the full formal header of the Galactic Council of Species, Grand Speaker's Office. Callum brought it to me on a Thursday, which was his regular visiting day. I was in the garden. He stood at the garden gate and held up his tablet with the particular expression he uses when something significant has happened, and he is waiting to see how I will react before deciding how he feels about it. They want to reopen membership negotiations, he said. New terms, full membership review. They are proposing. Is it a full vote? I asked. I did not look up from the rows I was working on. They are proposing a special session with modified procedures that would allow. Callum, I said. Is it a full and equal vote? He looked at the tablet. Read it carefully. I waited. It is more than they have offered before, he said, which was not quite an answer. But not a full vote. He was quiet for a moment. Not quite. I worked the rows for a little longer. There was a branch that needed redirecting, not cutting, just turned, encouraged toward better light. It took patience. It took knowing what you were working with. Put it in the file, I said. I will read it this evening. And I stood. I pulled off my gloves. I looked at the garden, the lavender along the east wall, the tomatoes along the south, the roses coming in better every year, the whole thing that had existed without me and gone on getting better the moment I started paying proper attention to it. And I will think about it, I said, carefully, without rushing, on our own time. Callum smiled, just slightly. The Compact's quarterly summit is in 3 weeks, he said. I know. The Yokai Authority has formally applied for full membership. I know that, too. And the Pell, the ones who lost the cargo hauler in the Drab Belt, they sent a preliminary inquiry about observer status. I looked at him. When? Yesterday. I thought about the Pell. Small species, no security fleet, always quietly relying on others for protection they were never quite formally promised. I knew something about that position. Send them the charter, I said, and tell them they are welcome. That evening, after Callum had gone, I sat in the study with the Council's message on my desk. I read it twice. It was long. 6 pages of formal language, and it had clearly been written by people who were trying hard to say something they were not quite sure how to say. Buried in the 5th page, past all the formal expressions of respect and historical partnership and recognition of Earth's extraordinary contributions, was a single sentence that I read 3 times. It said, "The Council acknowledges that its previous membership assessment processes may not have fully reflected the scope and significance of Earth's contributions to galactic stability, and requests the opportunity to review these assessments in the context of new dialogue. May not have fully reflected. 80 years. 3 generations of human diplomats. 47 unanswered requests. 173 votes against. May not have fully reflected." I set the message down. I looked out the window at the night garden. I thought about everything that sentence had cost, not the sentence itself, which was 6 words long, but the reality it was very carefully, very belatedly reaching toward. I thought about the young diplomat from Drathene asking if it felt like winning. I thought about Nora Daly on the deck of the Ashford asking whether to feel guilty. I thought about Callum, 26 years old, still believing that if you argued well enough, the right people would listen. I thought about what it had taken to find out he was both right and wrong about that. And I thought about what I had said to the young Drathene diplomat, about correction rather than competition, about what happens when you stop knocking and build your own door. I picked up my pen. I turned to a clean page in my notebook. I did not write a response to the Council, not yet.